They told me I was too old to love again, that I had no right to start over at my age. At 75, they thought I was invisible, forgotten by the world and by my own family. But then, against all odds, I met him. The man who would not only steal my heart, but show me that it's never too late to fight for happiness. This is the raw, untold story of how I reclaimed everything they tried to take from me, and how love found me when I thought I was too broken to deserve it. Don't miss a moment of this journey. Hit that subscribe button and join me as I share the rest of my story, because it's never too late to rewrite your life. I spent my days in quiet reflection, sipping tea in the mornings as I sat by the window, watching the world go by. I'd buried myself in volunteer work and spent time with my daughter, Sarah, and her 2 children. Their visits were frequent, and their love for me was a constant balm. But something was missing. A spark, a joy, a feeling I hadn't realized I craved so deeply until that fateful day when everything changed. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was at my favorite spot in the park, reading a book on a bench by the lake. The crisp autumn air made the leaves dance around me, but I wasn't watching them. My eyes were glued to the pages, following the story of 2 strangers finding each other after years of solitude. It was the kind of love story that made me smile, but also made me wonder if I could ever experience that kind of happiness again. That's when I saw him. He was an older man, not much younger than I, sitting on the opposite bench, reading a newspaper. There was something about him, his posture, the way his grey hair caught the sunlight, the gentle smile that played on his lips as he read. It was almost as if the universe was telling me that I wasn't as alone as I thought. I don't know what compelled me to speak to him. Maybe it was the loneliness I'd been suppressing for years, or the spark of curiosity that ignited when I saw him. Or maybe, just maybe, it was fate. "Lovely day, isn't it?" I said, breaking the silence between us. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. His smile widened. "It is indeed," he replied, with a voice that was smooth and warm, like the comforting embrace of a long-lost friend. "I come here every afternoon. There's something peaceful about the lake." I nodded. "I know what you mean. It's my little sanctuary too." We both chuckled, and the conversation flowed naturally from there. His name was Henry. He'd been a widower for 6 years, much like me. His late wife, Elaine, had passed after a long illness. He spoke of her with such tenderness, as if she were still by his side, laughing with him, sharing those mundane moments that make life meaningful. I listened intently, feeling a connection that I couldn't explain. It wasn't just the shared experience of loss, but something deeper, something that stirred within me and reminded me of the love I once had. I hadn't realized how much I missed that connection until that moment. As our conversation came to a close, he stood up, brushing off his pants. "It's getting late," he said, glancing at his watch. "I should be going, but I'll be here tomorrow, same time, if you'd like to join me again." I smiled, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, a flutter in my chest. "I'd like that," I said, my voice softer than I intended. And just like that, a simple exchange of words had set something in motion that I never expected. A possibility, a chance at love, a second chance, one I wasn't sure I deserved, but was willing to try for. The next day, I returned to the park, just as he promised. We sat together again, this time talking about everything and nothing all at once. We spoke about our lives, our losses, and our dreams. But the more we spoke, the more I realized that there was a quiet understanding between us, a bond that was slowly but surely growing. But even as our conversations became the highlight of my days, there was a lingering question I couldn't ignore. Was I too old for this? Was I too old to fall in love again? Henry was older than me, but there was something about him that made me feel like I was the young one, eager and full of life. Still, doubts crept into my mind. I wasn't a young woman anymore. I didn't have the same energy or the same dreams. Could this really be happening? Could I really be falling in love again? But Henry never seemed to care about age. He never spoke of it. He never mentioned that I was an older woman. To him, I was simply Eleanor, a woman who had lived through her fair share of heartache and had found a way to keep going. And that was enough for him. By the end of that first week, I realized something that shook me to my core. I wasn't just missing the companionship of a friend. I was yearning for love again, the kind of love that was real and raw, a love that didn't care about age, about time, about the past. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let fear or doubt hold me back. Life had given me a second chance, and I wasn't about to waste it. The following week, Henry and I began to meet every day. Our conversations deepened as we shared more about our lives, our families, our losses, our triumphs. I spoke of George, the love of my life, and how his death had left a void I never thought I'd fill. Henry, in turn, told me about his children, whom he loved dearly, but who had distanced themselves after Elaine's passing. It was as though both of us had built walls around our hearts, walls that were slowly starting to crumble with each passing day. One afternoon, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the lake in shades of gold and orange, Henry turned to me and asked the question I'd been waiting for, but dreading at the same time. "Eleanor," he began, his voice soft yet firm, "do you believe in second chances? In love, I mean." I paused, my breath catching. The question hung in the air, thick with possibility. My fingers curled around the edge of the bench, a small, nervous gesture I hadn't even realized I was making. "I've never really thought about it," I confessed. "After George, I thought love was something that belonged to another time in my life, something I couldn't have again." I looked out at the water, trying to steady my thoughts. "But meeting you, Henry, it makes me wonder." Henry leaned forward, his eyes searching mine. "You know," he said with a small, knowing smile, "I used to think the same thing. After Elaine, I thought that chapter of my life was over. But now, I don't know. I think there's still a lot of love to be shared in this world, regardless of our age." His words struck something deep within me. For so long I had been living in the shadow of grief, thinking that my heart was a place only for memories. I had closed myself off, not realizing that perhaps the universe still had more for me to experience. "But Henry," I said, the hesitation still lingering in my voice, "we're not young anymore. We've lived our lives, built our families, faced our losses. What if it's too late? What if we're just fooling ourselves?" Henry smiled, but there was a spark in his eyes, an understanding that I wasn't ready to admit to myself just yet. "It's never too late, Eleanor. Not for something real. Not for love." I swallowed hard, the knot in my chest tightening. My mind screamed with doubts, but my heart, the heart that had been dormant for so long, began to awaken. Maybe Henry was right. Maybe it wasn't too late. But still, I struggled with the idea. Love at our age, could it really work? Could I, at 75, allow myself to open up again? To trust again? The following days were filled with a mixture of excitement and fear. I found myself thinking of Henry constantly, his laughter, the way his hand brushed mine when we sat close together, the way his voice seemed to wrap around me like a warm blanket. But even as I felt these new emotions stirring within me, I couldn't ignore the practical side of me that worried about what this could mean. How would it affect my family? My daughter Sarah? What would my friends think? The questions swirled in my mind, and the uncertainty kept me at arm's length from fully embracing what was happening. Yet, Henry's presence was like a gentle force that continued to pull me closer, day by day. One afternoon, as I was leaving the park, Henry caught up with me. He was carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers, the kind I used to pick when I was a young girl. He handed them to me with a soft smile. "For you," he said simply. I stared at the flowers, feeling a lump form in my throat. I had always loved flowers, especially the ones that grew freely in the wild. There was something so beautiful about them, untamed and unapologetic. Just like love, perhaps. "Thank you," I whispered, holding them close. "They're beautiful." Henry stepped closer, his hand resting gently on mine. "Eleanor," he began, his voice full of sincerity. "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing. I don't want to waste any more time wondering what if." The words hit me like a wave. For so long, I had hidden behind the idea of what ifs. What if I opened my heart again and got hurt? What if my family didn't approve? What if I wasn't strong enough to face the consequences? But here was Henry, standing before me with nothing but honesty and hope in his eyes, offering me a chance. A real chance to love again. "I don't want to waste time either," I said, my voice trembling. "But I'm scared, Henry. I don't know if I'm ready." He squeezed my hand, his grip steady and reassuring. "We'll take it one step at a time, Eleanor. No pressure, just us." In that moment, I realized something I had been refusing to accept for months. I was ready. I was ready to stop hiding, to stop being afraid. I was ready to give love another chance, to embrace whatever it had in store for me, no matter how late it may seem. As the days turned into weeks, Henry and I grew closer, and with each passing day, my doubts slowly faded away. I still carried the remnants of my past with me, but Henry became the present I never thought I'd have, a reminder that life doesn't stop, and neither should we. I wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but one thing was clear. I wasn't too old to love again, and for the first time in a long while, I was ready to let myself feel it. As the weeks passed, Henry and I spent more time together. Our days were simple but full of joy, walking along the lake, sitting at cozy cafes, and enjoying quiet dinners at each other's homes. It felt like something out of a dream, something I hadn't realized I needed so desperately. But as much as I reveled in these moments, the reality of our situation began to sink in. Henry and I were both in our mid-70s, with health concerns, grown children, and lives that had already been shaped by decades of history. This wasn't the carefree, youthful love that movies and books seemed to promise. This was something more fragile and complex. One evening, as we sat at a small bistro by the river, the weight of our reality hung between us. I could see it in Henry's eyes, a mixture of happiness and hesitation. He had his own fears, ones I suspected had been buried deep for years. "Eleanor," he began, stirring his coffee slowly. "Have you ever thought about what happens next?" I raised an eyebrow, unsure of where he was going. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this." He gestured between the two of us. "This newfound love. We're both at an age where time feels different. We don't have the luxury of time that we once did. So I have to ask, are we being realistic?" I felt a pang in my chest. It wasn't what I wanted to hear, but it was a question I had been avoiding asking myself. How much time did we have left? Could we really build a life together? Or was this just a fleeting, beautiful moment in time? "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I've thought about it, Henry. And I think I think this is real, what we have. But I also know that time is precious, and I don't want to waste it. He reached across the table, taking my hand gently in his. I don't want to waste it either, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But we can't ignore the realities of our age. I've got my own health issues, Eleanor. I'm not the man I used to be. I squeezed his hand, feeling a lump form in my throat. Neither am I whispered, my voice cracking. But I don't want to be alone anymore. I don't want to spend my last years wondering, what if? Henry's eyes softened, and he gave me a smile that was both tender and full of understanding. You're not alone anymore, he said quietly, and I don't want to be alone either. Let's not think about time, Eleanor. Let's just live. His words were exactly what I needed to hear. For so long I had been plagued by doubts about whether it was too late for love, too late to start something new. But sitting there with Henry, his hand in mine, I realized that I wasn't too old to live, to love, or to be loved. I was still here, and that meant there was still time to make memories, time to take chances. As the months rolled on, I found myself becoming more open to the possibilities of our future. I wasn't living in the past anymore. I was living in the present. With Henry, I was rediscovering parts of myself I had long forgotten. My sense of adventure, my joy, my ability to love without fear. But love at our age wasn't always easy. We faced challenges that younger couples might never understand. We had to navigate the delicate balance between independence and togetherness, between the comfort of our own routines and the excitement of sharing a future together. We both had families to consider, children who were skeptical of our relationship and worried about the impact it would have on their lives. One afternoon, Sarah, my daughter, came over to visit. She had always been supportive of me, but when it came to Henry, she was hesitant. She had concerns about the stability of a relationship at our age, and I understood. As much as I wanted her to be happy for me, I couldn't ignore the worry in her eyes. "Mum," she said, sitting down beside me on the couch, I want you to be careful. You're not getting any younger, and Henry, he's a good man, but he's older too. What if something happens?" I sighed, trying to find the right words. "Sarah, I know you're worried, but I'm not going into this blindly. I know the realities of aging, and I know that time is short. But I also know that what Henry and I have, it's real. And I'm not going to spend another day second-guessing myself." Sarah looked at me for a long moment, her brow furrowed. Then, to my surprise, she softened. "I just want you to be happy, Mom. I don't want you to be hurt again." "I know," I said, reaching out to take her hand. "And I promise you, I'm not making this decision lightly. But I don't want to spend my life alone because I'm scared of what might happen. We all have to take chances, Sarah. And this is mine." There was a long pause before she nodded slowly, her eyes still filled with concern, but also a hint of acceptance. "I just want you to be sure." "I am," I said, my voice firm. "I'm sure." That conversation with Sarah stayed with me for days, but it also solidified my resolve. Love wasn't always easy, especially when it came to blending families and balancing the realities of aging. But Henry and I had something special, something worth fighting for. And I wasn't about to let fear or doubt hold me back anymore. The more time I spent with Henry, the more I realized that this wasn't just a fleeting romance. It was a partnership. It was two people who had lived their lives, who had known pain, loss, and heartache, coming together to share the time they had left. We didn't know what the future held, but we knew that, for once, we were choosing to live fully, together. As Henry and I grew closer, we both began to understand the unspoken bond we shared. It wasn't just about companionship or a late-blooming romance. It was about two people who had lived and loved, had been broken and healed, coming together to find peace in the twilight years of their lives. But that peace wasn't easy to find. It wasn't always calm or smooth. In fact, it was often a struggle, but a beautiful one. There were still days when I doubted myself, days when I wondered if Henry and I were just trying to recapture something we thought we had lost forever. Days when the weight of our age and the inevitable passage of time seemed too heavy to bear. The first time Henry and I truly faced our reality was when we discussed the idea of moving in together. It had been months since we'd met, and the connection between us had grown stronger with each passing day. We had become a constant in each other's lives, and the idea of merging our worlds felt natural. But as with everything else, the question remained: was this the right decision? "Do you ever think about the future, Eleanor?" Henry asked one evening as we sat on the porch of my house, the sun dipping low behind us. I leaned back in my chair, the gentle breeze ruffling my hair. "Every day?" I answered. "But I don't always like what I think. It's hard not to wonder what will happen to us, to me, as we get older." Henry nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "I think about it too. We're not getting any younger, and we both have baggage. I've got kids, you've got Sarah. What happens when we need more help? What if one of us gets sick?" His words hung in the air like a weight. Of course, these were things we both had to face. The reality of aging, the fragility of our bodies, the potential for illness. It was all a part of our journey together now. But I realized something as I looked at Henry. None of that mattered. None of it scared me. Not anymore. "Henry," I said softly, reaching for his hand. "I can't promise that we'll have forever. None of us can. But I do know this. What we have right now is enough. And I want to share it with you, whatever the future holds. If we have time, I want to spend it with you." He looked at me, his face softening with emotion. "You're right," he whispered. "I can't promise forever either, but I want to promise you today. Every day we have, I want it to be with you." And just like that, our decision was made. It wasn't about grand gestures or sweeping declarations. It was about a quiet understanding that we had both found something in each other that made life worth living, regardless of what the future might bring. As we settled into our new life together, I found that love wasn't about waiting for the perfect moment. It wasn't about avoiding the hard conversations or the fear of what might come next. Love was simply about choosing to be there for each other, day after day, no matter how much time we had left. But no matter how comfortable we became, the doubts still crept in. My daughter, Sarah, had grown more accepting of Henry over time. But I knew deep down that she still struggled with the idea of me moving on. She had been protective of me, worried that I might get hurt again. She was the daughter who had seen me through my darkest days, and I knew she just wanted what was best for me. Still, her concern weighed on me, and I wasn't sure how to ease her fears. One evening, after dinner, Sarah and I sat down in the living room. Henry was outside, tending to the garden, and for the first time in a while, it was just the two of us. The quiet between us felt thick, and I could feel the conversation coming, even though we hadn't spoken a word yet. "Mom," Sarah began, her voice tentative, "I need to ask you something." I nodded, bracing myself. "Of course, sweetheart. What is it?" She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the window where Henry was working. "Are you sure about this? About him? I mean, I just don't want you to be hurt. You've been through so much already." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her concern. "I understand, Sarah, and I know you want what's best for me, but I'm not doing this to fill a void or to distract myself." Henry makes me happy, and he respects me, loves me. It's real, Sarah, and I want you to see that." She sighed, her face softening. "I do see it, Mom. I don't want you to get hurt again. I don't want to lose you." I reached out and took her hand, holding it firmly. "You won't lose me, sweetheart. I'm still here. I always will be. And I'm making my own choices now. For the first time in a long time, I'm doing something just for me." There was a long pause as Sarah processed my words. I could see the struggle in her eyes, the tug of war between wanting me to be happy and wanting to protect me. Finally, she nodded, her expression more peaceful. "I just want you to be happy," she said quietly. "I want to see you living again, not just going through the motions." And just like that, the weight I had been carrying began to lift. I wasn't just living for myself anymore. I was living for the people I loved, and they were finally beginning to accept that I had the right to choose my own path. As the months passed, Henry and I continued to build our life together, one day at a time. We made plans for the future, even as we knew it might be a future we couldn't control. And every day, I grew more confident in my decision, in my love for him, and in the love he gave me. As the seasons shifted, so did our relationship. Henry and I began to weave our lives together more intricately, his routines blending with mine, our households merging in ways I hadn't expected. There were the small things, like deciding what to make for dinner, where to put the new furniture, or whether to keep the old paintings that hung on my walls or trade them for something we'd pick out together. Then, there were the bigger things, the conversations we hadn't yet had, but knew we needed to. One evening, after we'd settled into our new home, Henry and I sat on the back porch, enjoying the stillness of the night. The air was cool, and the stars were scattered across the sky, as if they were winking at us from the heavens. We both sat in silence, the kind of quiet that feels comfortable, not awkward. It was a familiar rhythm by now, a rhythm I had learned to love. But tonight, the silence held a different weight. I felt a question pressing on my chest, one I'd been avoiding for weeks. I glanced over at Henry, watching the soft glow of the porch light reflect off his face. His eyes were fixed on the sky, his expression thoughtful, almost as if he were waiting for me to say something. "Henry," I began, my voice tentative, "do you ever think about the future? Beyond us, I mean. Do you ever think about the end?" He turned to look at me, his brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean, Eleanor?" I hesitated, unsure of how to phrase it. "I mean, we're not getting any younger. We've both been through so much: loss, pain, change. What happens when we can't take care of ourselves anymore? What happens when one of us needs more than the other can give?" The question hung in the air between us, and I saw a flicker of vulnerability cross his face. "I think about it," he said slowly. "I think about it all the time. I don't want to leave you alone, Eleanor. I don't want to be a burden either. But the truth is, none of us can control how long we have. We can't predict what will happen next. All we can do is make the most of the time we have together." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle in my heart. It was a truth I didn't want to face, but one I knew was unavoidable. None of us were promised forever. But despite the uncertainties of life, I realized that I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the future, not of the unknown, not when I had Henry by my side. "I don't want to spend another day fearing what might happen," I said softly, my hand resting gently on his. "I want to keep living, Henry. Keep loving, no matter what comes." He smiled, his eyes filled with warmth and understanding. "And we will, Eleanor. We'll make the most of every single day." As the weeks turned into months, Our bond continued to strengthen. But life, as it often does, threw us a curveball. One afternoon, I received a call from my doctor. A routine checkup turned into something more serious. The words "unexplained symptoms" and concern for further tests echoed in my mind long after I hung up the phone. I didn't want to worry Henry. I didn't want to burden him with the thought that something might be wrong with me. But the fear crept in, seeping into my bones like a cold wind, and I knew I couldn't keep it from him forever. That evening, as we sat down to dinner, I could hardly look him in the eye. He noticed immediately. "Eleanor," Henry said, his voice soft but insistent. "What's going on?" "You've been quiet all evening. Something's wrong." I felt my throat tighten, but I knew I had to tell him. I got a call from the doctor today. There are some concerns. They want to run more tests." His face fell, and I saw the immediate concern flood his eyes. "What kind of concerns?" "Eleanor, what's happening?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "It's nothing for sure, just some symptoms that need further investigation. I'm sure it's nothing, Henry, but I wanted you to know." He didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at me as if weighing his words carefully. Then, he reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "We'll get through this, Eleanor," he said firmly, his voice steady. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this. Not now. Not ever." I felt a rush of gratitude wash over me, but also a deep fear. The possibility of losing my health, of facing something unknown, was terrifying. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't facing it alone, and that made all the difference. In the days that followed, I went through the necessary tests, the blood work, the scans, and the waiting. The uncertainty was unbearable, but each day Henry was there, sitting with me, holding my hand, comforting me when the fear began to overwhelm me. He didn't ask for anything in return, just gave me his presence and his love. The day the results came in, Henry was by my side once again. The doctor's office felt too sterile, too impersonal, and the words that came from the doctor's mouth seemed to blur into a fog. But the one thing I heard clearly was that the tests had come back normal. There was nothing to be concerned about. I was fine. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, but I saw the relief flood Henry's face too, and I knew that we had both been living in the shadow of uncertainty. We left the doctor's office together, hand in hand, and as we stepped out into the sunlight, I realized something. I had been afraid of losing my health. Yes, but more than that, I had been afraid of losing the one thing that had brought me back to life, Henry's love. And in that moment, I understood that I wasn't just living for myself anymore. I was living for us, for the love we had found, the future we had yet to explore, and the life we were determined to make, no matter what came our way. After the doctor's visit, life seemed to slow down for a moment. The fears that had clouded my mind dissipated, but they left behind something stronger, an unspoken resolve. I couldn't keep hiding from the truth anymore, from the fact that time was precious, that love, despite its late arrival, had the power to heal, to build, and to endure. We continued to spend our days in the comfort of each other's company. But now, there was a new understanding between Henry and me. We had both lived full lives, some chapters harder than others, but there was no denying the fact that we were in the autumn of our years, a season of change that required acceptance and courage. One chilly morning, Henry and I found ourselves sitting in our favorite cafe, a small, cozy spot by the river that we'd discovered a few months ago. We had begun to make it our weekly ritual, a place where we could talk freely without the constraints of time or expectations. as we sipped our coffee, the warm, fragrant brew filling the air between us. I noticed a small group of young women seated at the table across from us, laughing and chatting excitedly. I smiled, feeling a pang of nostalgia for the days when I, too, had been young and carefree. But then I looked at Henry, his eyes twinkling with mischief as he watched the women. "What is it?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Just remembering," he said softly, his voice rich with emotion. "I remember thinking when I was young that I had all the time in the world. I took it for granted, you know? Now, I see things differently. Every moment with you is a gift, Eleanor. I don't want to waste a single second of it." My heart swelled at his words, and I reached for his hand across the table. "Neither do I said, my voice filled with sincerity. "Every moment with you feels like a blessing, Henry. I don't think I truly understood the value of time until I found you." We sat in silence for a few minutes, simply enjoying the feeling of being present with one another. And then, as if on cue, Henry spoke again, his voice serious but filled with love. "Eleanor," he began, "I've been thinking a lot lately about what we've built, what we've shared. And I know we've both faced our share of challenges, of heartache. But I want you to know something. I want to make the most of whatever time we have left. I want us to make memories. I want to travel. I want to experience everything we can together. No regrets. No fear." I looked at him, my heart racing with emotion. It was exactly what I had been hoping for. This simple, unspoken understanding that we weren't just drifting through life anymore. We were making a conscious decision to live, fully and without hesitation. "Where do you want to go first?" I asked, a smile tugging at my lips. Henry's eyes lit up, his face lighting up with that same youthful spark I had come to adore. "Anywhere. Everywhere. Let's make a list of places we've always wanted to visit and go. Let's see the world, Eleanor." And just like that, we were planning. We began to create a list of destinations, places that had always fascinated us, but that we had never visited, places that had been dreams tucked away in our hearts. From the vibrant streets of Paris, to the serene beauty of the Greek islands, to the snowy landscapes of Alaska, our list grew longer with each passing day. It wasn't about checking off boxes on a travel itinerary. It was about creating moments that would become our shared story. Every city, every adventure, was a new chapter of our life together, one where the worries of the past couldn't follow. But not everything about this new chapter was filled with excitement and joy. There were challenges too, and as we made plans to travel, I realized there was something that still needed to be addressed. A conversation I had been putting off for too long. "Henry," I said one night as we sat in the living room looking over travel brochures, "there's something we need to talk about." He set down the brochure and looked at me, his expression instantly shifting to one of concern. "What is it, Eleanor?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "It's about my family. My daughter, Sarah. I think she's struggling with us being together. She's still worried about me getting hurt, about how it'll affect the family." Henry sat back in his chair, folding his hands together. "I understand, Eleanor. It's hard for them to see you move on, to see you happy again. But that's your life, not theirs. And you deserve to be happy. To live." "I know," I said quietly. "But it's hard, Henry. Sarah and I have always been close, and I don't want to hurt her. I don't want to feel like I'm betraying her by choosing my own happiness." Henry reached across the table, taking my hands in his. "You're not betraying anyone. You're not doing anything wrong by choosing yourself, by choosing love. Sarah will come around. But you have to live for you, Eleanor. You've spent too many years living for others." His words were a reminder I needed. I had spent so much of my life taking care of everyone else, making sure their needs were met, that I had forgotten what it felt like to care for myself, to prioritize my own happiness. Henry's love had given me permission to do just that, and I wasn't about to let guilt hold me back. "Thank you," I said softly, squeezing his hands. "I know you're right. I don't want to lose her." "You won't," Henry reassured me, his voice steady. "You're just finding your own path, Eleanor. And when Sarah sees how happy you are, she'll understand." The next day, I called Sarah. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was time to have the conversation. We spoke for a while, and slowly, I began to explain everything. How Henry and I had found something special. How I wasn't trying to replace George. How much I valued their relationship. But that this was my life now. At first, there was silence on the other end. I feared I had lost her, feared she wouldn't understand. But then, slowly, Sarah spoke. "I just want you to be happy, Mom," she said, her voice softer than it had been in weeks. "I'm just scared. I've seen so much loss, and I don't want you to be hurt again." I sighed with relief, feeling a weight lift from my chest. "I know, sweetheart. I understand. But I'm not asking you to understand right now. I just want you to know that I'm okay, that I'm happy, and I'm not going anywhere." There was a long pause before Sarah spoke again. "I guess I need to get used to it, don't I?" "Yes, but you don't have to rush," I said with a small laugh. "We'll take this one step at a time." And just like that, the first barrier between us began to crumble. It wasn't gone completely, but it was a start. Henry and I had built something beautiful, and now, little by little, I was learning to share it with the people I loved. As the months passed, things between Henry and me continued to evolve. The trip we had planned was more than just an adventure. It became a symbol of everything we had found together. A life that was no longer defined by our past losses, but by the choices we made today. We packed our bags with excitement and anticipation, our list of destinations growing as we visited more places. But it wasn't the places themselves that mattered. It was the moments we shared there. Paris was first on our list, the city of lights, the city of love. We spent our days wandering the cobblestone streets, holding hands as we strolled along the Seine River. The cafes became our sanctuaries, where we sipped wine and talked for hours. I had always dreamed of visiting Paris, but I never imagined I would be here. Not as a tourist, but as a woman rediscovering what it meant to live. One evening, we found ourselves at the Eiffel Tower, standing on the observation deck as the city spread out beneath us. The lights twinkled like stars, and I felt a sense of awe that I hadn't experienced in years. Henry squeezed my hand and smiled at me, his eyes reflecting the same wonder I felt. "This is beautiful," I said, my voice catching slightly. "It is," Henry agreed, his voice soft but filled with emotion. "But you know, Eleanor, the beauty of it isn't just the city or the view. It's you. It's us." I looked up at him, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. There was no past, no uncertainty about the future. There was only this moment, this love that had come to us so unexpectedly but so perfectly. The next morning, we traveled to Rome. The history, the ruins, the sheer magnificence of the city, it all felt like stepping back in time. But it was not the ancient stones or grand monuments that captivated me. It was the laughter we shared as we walked through the narrow streets. Henry teasing me about my lack of direction, while I playfully scolded him for being so stubborn. We had become not just partners in love, but partners in life, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. We spent a week in Italy, moving between the cobbled streets of Rome, the peaceful hills of Tuscany, and the romantic canals of Venice. We shared meals, made memories, and talked about everything, from our childhoods to our dreams. With each passing day, I began to realize that Henry and I had done something extraordinary. We had given ourselves permission to fall in love again, to embrace the beauty of life despite its inevitable challenges. But as we journeyed through Europe, something began to shift in me. My doubts had been replaced with an overwhelming sense of gratitude. There was still so much to explore, so much to experience, and I realized that I didn't need to be afraid of what the future held. I had Henry by my side, and together, we could face anything. As we finished our travels, Henry and I began to look ahead, not to the final chapter of our lives, but to the next part of our journey. We had made memories that would last forever, but I also realized something important during our time abroad. It wasn't the exotic places or the grand adventures that mattered most. It was the quiet moments, the everyday moments, that I would treasure the most. On our last evening in Venice, we sat by the canal, the soft sounds of the water lapping against the boats. The city was bathed in the soft glow of sunset, and for the first time in weeks, I felt completely at peace. "You know," I said softly, "I never imagined I'd find this again. I never thought I'd be here with someone like you." Henry smiled, his eyes filled with affection. "I never imagined it either, but I'm glad we did. I'm glad we found each other, Eleanor." We sat in comfortable silence, letting the world spin around us. In that moment, I realized something profound. We weren't just two people who had found each other later in life. We were two people who had chosen to build something beautiful in the face of everything that had come before. We had created a love that was ours, unique, full of history, and yet new at the same time. When we returned home, it was as though we had brought a piece of the world back with us. We had shared something so intimate, so life-changing, that nothing could ever diminish it. But we also knew that our next chapter was just beginning. I had thought for so long that love, for me, had come and gone, that the best parts of life were behind me. But Henry had shown me that love didn't have a timeline. It wasn't about how young or old you were. It was about the choices you made, the risks you took, and the willingness to embrace love when it came knocking at your door, no matter how late. Back home, I continued to spend time with Sarah and my grandchildren. I made sure they saw the happiness Henry and I had built together. There were still moments of doubt, still moments when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But with Henry by my side, those moments became easier to navigate. Together, we were creating a new family, one built on love, respect, and acceptance. One evening, as I sat on the porch with Henry, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized that everything I had hoped for was within reach. I wasn't just living my life, I was living it fully, in every sense of the word. And I was doing it with someone who loved me not in spite of my age, but because of who I was. We had found love in the second half of our lives, and it had become the most beautiful part of all. As the seasons changed, so did our lives. The days of travel and spontaneous adventures gave way to quieter moments at home. Henry and I had settled into a rhythm, one that was comforting and fulfilling. But even in the serenity of our newfound life together, there was a part of me that still longed for something more, a deeper understanding of what our future could hold. Henry was always encouraging me to dream big, to pursue the passions I had set aside in my younger years. "You still have so much to give, Eleanor," he'd tell me. "Don't wait. Now's the time." It was with this encouragement that I found myself signing up for an art class. I'd always loved painting, but had never given myself the time to pursue it seriously. My days were filled with family obligations, raising children, and then caring for George when he became ill. Art had always been a quiet longing, something I tucked away in a drawer along with my other dreams. But now, with Henry by my side, I felt emboldened to take a chance. The first day of class was a whirlwind of nerves and excitement. I walked into the small studio, greeted by the smell of paint and the sound of brushes against canvas. There were women of all ages, from young mothers to older women like myself, all eager to express themselves through art. I felt an immediate sense of belonging, as if this was a space I had been waiting for my entire life. As I picked up my brush for the first time in years, I realized something that took me by surprise. I had forgotten how much I loved creating. The colors on the canvas were no longer just strokes of paint. They were my emotions, my past, and my hopes for the future all coming together in a beautiful chaos. For the first time in years, I was creating something just for me, something that had nothing to do with anyone else. In the weeks that followed, I spent every available moment at the art studio. It became my sanctuary, my place to breathe and to rediscover parts of myself that I had long ignored. Henry was incredibly supportive, often accompanying me to the studio, waiting patiently for me while I painted, and listening attentively when I shared my latest works with him. "I've never seen you so alive, Eleanor," he said one evening, as I proudly showed him a piece I had just finished. It was a landscape, a swirling mix of colors that captured the beauty of the Texas sky at sunset. "You've really found your passion." I smiled, a mixture of pride and gratitude swelling in my chest. "I never knew I needed this, Henry. I didn't realize how much of myself I had kept hidden." That's when I realized that Henry hadn't just brought love into my life. He had also brought me back to myself. He had given me the courage to face the unknown, to embrace the future with open arms. As the months passed, Henry and I continued to grow together, but something began to shift. We were no longer just two people living out the remainder of our years. We were building a legacy, one of love, creativity, and resilience. Our shared experiences, our travels, and the lessons we had learned from each other were creating something larger than us. And with that realization came a deeper understanding of what love truly meant. One afternoon, after finishing a piece of art for a local gallery, I sat down with Henry in the living room. We were having one of our quiet evenings, sipping tea and talking about our future. I realized, as we sat there, that we had both faced our fears of growing old alone, of being forgotten. But what we had discovered in each other was not just love, it was purpose. "I've been thinking," I began, my voice hesitant. "We've been so focused on living in the moment, on our adventures and our time together. But there's something more. There's something we need to build, not just for us, but for the world." Henry looked at me, his eyes curious. "What do you mean?" "I mean that we've been so blessed to find each other, to love again, and to experience life in ways we never thought possible. But there are others, other women like me, like you, who haven't had the same opportunities. We've both seen the way people in our age group are overlooked, ignored, and silenced. It's not right." Henry sat back, considering my words. "You're right, Eleanor. We've both seen it. But what can we do?" I felt a surge of determination rise within me. "We can help. We can give others the chance to find what we've found. We can create a space for women to rediscover themselves, to find love, to live without fear of being overlooked. It's time we take everything we've learned and build something lasting." Henry's face softened with understanding, and I saw the same spark in his eyes that had ignited when we first met. "I think that's a wonderful idea," he said. "What do you have in mind?" I smiled, feeling my heart swell with the possibility of what we could create. "I want to start a foundation, a place where women can go to find support, to find healing, to rediscover who they are. A place where love and purpose are never out of reach." That evening, we began to sketch out ideas for the foundation. We talked about its mission, its goals, and how we would reach out to women who needed help. We wanted to provide a safe haven for those who had been overlooked, abused, or forgotten. We wanted to create a legacy of love, one that would continue long after we were gone. It wasn't just about the foundation. It was about giving women the power to reclaim their lives, to embrace their second chances, just as I had done with Henry. We would build something beautiful, something that would carry the torch for generations to come. As we sat there, planning the future, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. Henry and I had found love again, yes, but what we were building together was something even more important. A legacy that would inspire others to live fully, to love deeply, and to never give up on their dreams, no matter how late it seemed. The idea of the foundation took root quickly. Henry and I spent countless hours discussing the logistics, the mission, and the vision. We knew this was no small undertaking, but neither of us had ever been afraid of hard work. If anything, this was the most important thing we would ever build together. We named it the Eleanor Grace Foundation, a name that felt right, one that reflected both our journey and the journey we hoped to guide others on. The mission was simple: to create a space for women, particularly those in their later years, who had faced abandonment, abuse, or neglect. We would provide support, resources, and a community where women could rebuild their lives, just as I had rebuilt mine with Henry by my side. At first, it was just the two of us. But as we shared our vision with close friends, family, and acquaintances, we began to see the ripple effect. The idea was contagious. Soon, people came forward offering their expertise. Lawyers, financial advisors, even volunteers who wanted to help create the first safe space for women in need. One evening, as we finalized the legal documents and began organizing the first donation event, I sat down with Henry. The weight of everything we were about to embark on was settling in. It wasn't just about us anymore. It was about a cause that could help countless others. "I think we're really doing this, Henry," I said, my voice full of emotion. "We're actually building something that will last, something that will make a difference." Henry smiled, reaching for my hand. "We've always done things together, Eleanor. This is no different. And we're not doing it for us, are we? We're doing it because we know what it feels like to be overlooked, to be cast aside. We know that everyone deserves a second chance." And just like that, the foundation became more than an idea. It became a living, breathing entity. With each step forward, I could feel a sense of purpose solidifying. We weren't just providing shelter, we were providing hope. And more importantly, we were showing women that they were never too old to change, to heal, to love again. Months passed, and the foundation began to take shape in ways that I could have never imagined. The first women arrived at Grace Haven, the small, welcoming home we had established as the foundation's core project. It was more than just a building. It was a symbol of rebirth, of possibilities unfolding where once there had been only silence and pain. The first woman to enter Grace Haven was Clara, a woman in her late 60s who had spent the past few years in an abusive relationship. Her children had turned their backs on her, and she had nowhere else to go. When she walked through the doors of our center, her eyes were filled with doubt and fear, but they slowly transformed into something else: hope. Clara's story wasn't unique. In the weeks that followed, more women arrived, each carrying their own heavy burden, each seeking refuge. But most of all, they were seeking validation. Validation that they were still worthy of love, of respect, and of the opportunity to live their lives on their terms. One day, as I sat with Clara and a few of the other women in the garden, sipping tea and talking about their dreams, I realized that the foundation was doing something I hadn't expected. It was healing me too. Watching these women find their voice again, seeing them rediscover their strength, reminded me of my own journey with Henry. I was no longer just a survivor of my past. I had become a part of something much bigger than myself. "I never thought I'd feel safe again," Clara said one afternoon, her voice thick with emotion. "But this place, it's like a new beginning, a chance to start over." I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. "You have everything it takes, Clara. You're not starting over. You're starting new." As the months went by, Grace Haven grew. We opened new branches in other cities, and the stories of our success spread. Women who had once felt like their lives were over found a new sense of purpose. We offered legal advice, therapy, and, most importantly, a community of support. The women who came through our doors found not just a place to stay, but a place to thrive. Henry and I continued to lead the foundation together, but the work was no longer just about the two of us. It was about the legacy we were leaving behind. It was about the women we helped, the lives we touched, and the hearts we healed. It was about the realization that love, no matter when it comes, has the power to change everything. As I stood on the front porch of Grace Haven one evening, watching the sunset with Henry by my side, I realized that this was what we had worked for. This was our legacy. Not just the love we had found, but the lives we had changed along the way. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" I asked Henry, my voice soft. He looked at me, his eyes filled with gratitude and love. "Every day, Eleanor. Every day." We stood there, hand in hand, watching as the sky changed colors, and I felt a deep peace settle within me. The road had been long and at times difficult, but every step had led me here, to Henry, to the foundation, and to the women whose lives we had touched. And in that moment, I knew that love was not just about finding happiness. It was about giving it away, sharing it with others, and watching it grow. It's funny how life comes full circle sometimes. In the beginning, I never thought I'd have this life filled with love, purpose, and a sense of fulfillment. I had believed that my best days were behind me, that the future was something to be feared rather than embraced. But here I am, sitting on the porch of Grace Haven, surrounded by women who have found their way back to themselves, who have rediscovered their strength, and who, like me, have embraced a second chance at life. Henry and I spent many evenings like this, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the sky painted with hues of gold and purple. These moments, these simple, quiet moments, remind me that life doesn't have to be extraordinary to be beautiful. It's the small things, the connections, the acts of kindness, and the love we share that make it meaningful. Our work at the foundation was far from over, but it had become something that filled me with pride every single day. Every woman who walked through the doors of Grace Haven brought with her a new story, a new journey, and a new lesson. And I realized something as I listened to their stories. These women were not unlike me. They too had loved and lost, had fought and survived, and they were all deserving of the same chance to live fully, to love deeply, and to be seen for who they truly were. But there was one last piece of the puzzle I had to confront: the relationship with my own family. Sarah, my daughter, had gradually come to accept Henry and our relationship. She still had moments of concern, but I could see that she was finally understanding that I wasn't trying to replace the past. I was simply moving forward. I had always thought that the relationship with my children would define me, but I had learned over time that I was allowed to live my own story, separate from their expectations. And then, one quiet evening, the phone rang. It was Sarah. "Mum," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Can we talk?" I felt a lump form in my throat. Of course, sweetheart. What's going on? I've been thinking a lot, Sarah continued. I know I wasn't thrilled about you and Henry at first, but I see how happy you are, and I can't keep holding on to the past. I can't keep treating you like you need to be protected from everything. I want to be there for you, Mum. I want to be part of this, part of the life you've built with Henry. Tears welled in my eyes as I listened to her words. After everything, after all the distance, Sarah was finally embracing the woman I had become. And in that moment, I realized something profound. My journey had come full circle. I had fought for myself, for my right to love again, to live again. And now, I was no longer defined by what others expected of me. I was my own person. Sarah, I'm so proud of you, I said, my voice breaking. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for letting me live my truth. I'm proud of you too, Mum, she replied softly. You've shown me what it means to be strong, to be true to yourself. I've learned so much from you. The call ended with a promise to visit soon, and as I set the phone down, I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me. I had rebuilt my life, not just for me, but for the people I loved. I had become the woman I always wanted to be, one who wasn't afraid to embrace love, to face challenges, and to build something beautiful from the ashes of the past. That night, Henry and I sat on the porch, just as we had so many times before, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the darkening sky. We didn't need words. We didn't need anything except the knowledge that we had done something extraordinary, together. We had taken a chance on love, on life, on second chances. And now, with Grace Haven thriving and our foundation growing, I knew that this was just the beginning. Henry, I said softly, breaking the silence, I've never felt more alive, more myself. Thank you for helping me find this. He smiled, his eyes soft with love and understanding. You were always here, Eleanor. You just needed to remember that. I rested my head on his shoulder, the warmth of his presence grounding me. I'm so glad I remembered, I whispered. So glad I found you. And in that moment, I understood that this wasn't just the end of one chapter. It was the beginning of a new one. A chapter filled with hope, with love, and with the knowledge that no matter how old we were, it was never too late to start again.